Are you ready to master the waves of medical device product development? Well, wax up your surfboard because you are listening to Inspired by Amua. And here is your medical device product development expert, that Hawaiian-hearted hostess who will help you hang 10, Megan Alonso.
And aloha! Welcome to another episode of InspiredByAmua.com, and I hope you guys are ready. I have a great guest lined up for us today. She is the president of LifePak Labs, which is a contract testing laboratory and offers technology services. It's a jointly owned business operated by Life Packaging Technology and MoCon, which is involved in laboratory instrumentation. So they do not only testing services for packaging of medical devices, but they offer services where they do packaging engineering as well. So help me in joining Karen Greene to the show. Karen, are you ready to hang 10?
I'm ready, Megan. Let's go.
All right. So I think what you do is really interesting, and a lot of people don't think about this when they're developing a medical device. So just give us a few tips and insight into what they need to be thinking about when they start their engineering process.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. Packaging is frequently the last thing that people think about because they're so focused on designing the medical device and regulatory compliance, just getting it to be functional. There's just so many, technology and design hurdles that packaging is something that it's just kind of last on their list. So it's gotten a lot better, I'd say, over the years because packaging engineers are usually an integral part of the teams, and they try to educate the product development team on the value of packaging and how integrating packaging design and development up front. It's really part of the design control process. So it should be thought of right at the outset and in parallel with the design control process and the product development process, because as medical devices become more and more sophisticated and we get more combination products, drug device, drug biologic, device, electronics are incorporated, that the packaging is really part of the product itself. So there's a lot of value the packaging can add, and they need to treat it, kind of with the same design control rigor that they would the package. So we try to get engaged early, and product development folks should be thinking about that too, engaging early.
So one thing that I was thinking about today, so the term packaging engineering can be confusing sometimes. Some people think it's the package that the device goes inside of, which is rightfully so, and that's part of it. Like if you were to have this shipped to you, it comes inside of an Amazon box, for instance. I'm just using this as an example. So it comes in its Amazon brown box, but then once you open that brown box, there's the air pellets or the air pockets that they have around that, and then there's the actual package. So maybe you open a box and there's some foam inside of there securing the device, or maybe it's in a plastic bag, and then you finally get to the device. So there's that aspect of it, but then there's also the aspect of maybe the device is housing some reagents, or like you mentioned, some drugs. So that is a package in of itself. So give us some more details on both sides of that.
Yeah, so packaging has multiple levels, Megan, as you kind of indicated, and the terms that we usually use are like primary, secondary, tertiary, and I think fourth level might be quaternary. So a packaging engineer, sometimes the business of developing packaging is broken out into what they call primary packaging, which is the package that's most intimate with the drug or the device. So that type of package is really very closely allied with the product itself. So there usually has to be quite a bit of testing, very long-term testing. A lot of shelf life evaluation usually goes in, is involved with a primary package. So that's one level of packaging design, and for a sterile medical device, that package has to be the sterile barrier. So that's kind of a big focus of that primary package, is to provide sterile barrier integrity over the life of the product. Then you move out farther away from the product, the device, or the drug, and they'll call that secondary packaging. That might be more like a shelf carton. The purpose of that is probably more like a dust cover, to convey important information about the product, labeling, expiration dates. So that package, when people design that kind of a package, they're thinking about, at least for medical devices, how storage issues, how it sits on the shelf, how the clinician can access the product quickly, identify the product quickly, and so there's a little less interaction and testing that might go on with the secondary packaging, but then you're focused a lot around design and storage and dimension and ease of identification. Then, depending on the type of product that you have and its requirements, you get into the tertiary packaging. There's all kinds of issues with that too. There's physical protection. Your product could be temperature sensitive, so you kind of get into this whole realm of thermal packaging. Like if you have a drug that has to be kept at refrigerated temperatures, so now you're designing what we might call a shipper that perhaps has insulation, and that we can demonstrate it maintains the required temperature for a certain period of time. You have to evaluate that, test that, and validate that, as well as if it's a kind of a high volume product and it's shipped in large quantities on a pallet, so you're cubing out a big pallet and you want the most efficient dimension to fit on the pallet, so you're getting the most number of units on a pallet. That's another area you can a packaging engineer would get involved in. So packaging engineers get involved in an enormous range of activity, from how that primary package interacts with a device and protects it and provides all the requirements, up to how it moves through the supply chain throughout the world. So you start to almost deal with like the FedExes and the UPSs of the world, as well as something they call like third-party logistics, companies that just help you move your product around the world. So a big scope for a packaging engineer.
So Karen, I've been to your facility, and you've got many exciting things going on over there, and it's quite the experience to walk in your acceleration oven. So walk our guests through, since we can't physically walk them through the oven, kind of walk them through the equipment that you have there, and the layout, and how your equipment can help them.
Sure, Megan. So we're a relatively small laboratory, but we have big aspirations.
Oh, and this is, for those of you listening, this is in Vista, California, which is just north of San Diego, about 30 miles. Yes,
lovely Vista. Our facility is, as I mentioned, is relatively small, but we have certainly space to grow, and sufficient space for the instrumentation that we have. And maybe just a quick little bit of background. So our focus is primarily in providing testing services around package integrity. I'll kind of use that very broadly. And what do I mean by that? So we have, as Megan indicated, we have a number of environmental chambers, and those chambers are capable of generating cold, hot, and humidity. And they're all programmable with controllers, so we can develop custom temperature and humidity profiles for whatever the customer's trying to do. in medical device, and really in many products, food requires this as well, something called shelf life. And shelf life kind of is a generic term, and what we mean by that is how long does my widget, my thing, my product stay good, if you will, just to use simple language. And good is usually meeting your specifications for whatever that is. So we use the chambers, the environmental chambers, for example, to do something called accelerated aging, which allows us to, using temperature, it's kind of temperature heats like a catalyst, to accelerate chemical reactions to create a real-time equivalent. So there are some ASTM, which is a standardized test method. It's a society that creates standardized test methods for anyone to utilize. So ASTM has a test method around accelerated aging. It's widely used in medical device for packaging. You can apply it, it's a thermodynamic principle. You can apply it really to anything where you want to accelerate time, basically. And what it allows you to do is gather data in a shorter amount of time, because people don't want to wait 2 years necessarily to do a shelf life test and then release their product, because time is money. You want to get your product on the market. So,
exactly.
So we have chambers, and we have something called the Universal Test System, which the brand is Instron, and I only say that because it's a common instrument that people in the industry are aware of, and it's basically a unit that can provide tensile measurement in the tensile direction and compression, so we can basically pull things apart and we can crush them, and do some standardized tests in that arena for packaging and for products, for medical devices. Sometimes companies will want to quantify like a bond strength. If they have tubing that's bonded together, we can quantify them out of the strength of that bond, just as an example. We have some other MOCON instrumentation in our laboratory. MOCON is the manufacturer of instrumentation that can measure package strength through burst testing, through pressure decay testing. We have an oxygen headspace analyzer. We can accurately, if your product's oxygen sensitive, we can accurately measure the amount of oxygen, inside your package. So we can do other tests for leakage, dye ingress testing, bubble leak testing for leakage, dye penetration. So many, I won't rattle off all the ASTM standards, put everybody to sleep, but we can do a whole host of standardized test methods, and then we can customize methods too if a customer is interested in discovering more about their package or their system.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so walk us through, like the classic example that comes to my mind is someone that will be shipping their product, and you mentioned FedEx and UPS. So their product, they take it, or they have someone pick it up, and then it is trucked somewhere and then loaded on a plane. So some of the testing that would be involved in that is, how does the product react when you take it up to 30,000 feet? And what, not only the product, but the packaging around it. And so I can think of that example. Walk us through some other real life examples that people really need to be concerned about, and how your services can really help avoid future problems and identify them early on.
Yep, good question, Megan. So I forgot to mention we have a vacuum oven, or we could also use it like an altitude chamber. So we can create the pressure equivalent. There's a conversion chart. So if you're at 30,000 feet, or actually most, I think air cargo, they pressurize the cargo hold to about 8,000 feet. So I think when
I never knew that.
Yeah. So when we're inside the plane, when we're flying southwest from point A to point B, the atmospheric pressure inside that airplane is about what you would feel at 8,000 feet, like if you went to Mammoth Mountain here in California.
And I know even on the plane as a person, you have your little lotion bottle or your hand sanitizer and it expands. So.
Yeah. And that, because here in lovely San Diego, we're basically at sea level, right? So if you go to Denver at 5,000 feet, you might see your hand lotion or your potato chip bag, puff up a little bit. That's because there's less pressure, at 5,000 feet than at sea level, and it's a little bit more, about 8,000 feet in a plane. So, so that said, if just use that as an example, if a client has a pouch, some type of pouch or bag system, or if they have a container closure system, again, we're in the, I guess I'm in the business of leakage, so. The customer, they don't want their seals to pop open, and sometimes if the package is constrained in the shipper box and it kind of expands, you could blow a seal, right? And now you got you're compromising your product, right? Anytime your seal's open, that's an undesirable situation. So we can simulate the altitude and see if we're getting that phenomenon of seals popping open, and that's useful information for the customer. Maybe they have to go back and change their sealing parameters or change the material to not have that happen. Or if they have a reagent in a container closure system, screw top jar, the plastic will kind of contract or expand based on the negative pressure, and if they have a liquid, it could leak, or if they have a powder, it could leak. So we can help them understand that type of environmental hazard. That's what they call it, Megan.
Yeah.
And with the environmental chambers, temperature and humidity, they do kind of nasty things to most things, right? And as your product moves through the supply chain, it's not sitting really in general for extended periods of time, because in general you want the freight gets moved, but it can. It's very hot and very cold in many different parts of the world. So products sitting on a tarmac, it's waiting to get loaded on a plane. So we can help them through some standard environmental profiles that are out there. We can simulate what their product will see through the supply chain for temperature, for humidity, and evaluate that. And that data is useful for the customer to see whether their product is behaving, appropriately, meeting their specs, or whether there's some negative consequences of that heat and humidity and cold, on their product. We don't have the transit testing equipment, so we might work with another laboratory to do things like execute a drop test or a vibration test.
So explain the drop and vibration test. What is that simulating?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and a lot of people spend a lot of time, on this. It seems like a pretty boring subject, but it gets exciting when you can expose your product to these, I'll call them environmental hazards, and stuff starts breaking or breaking down. So there's been research by a few standard-setting organizations where they've actually taken, I'll call it a black box. It's like a data logger that it might have an accelerometer inside of it, and temperature loggers where it can track. If you put it in a box with your product and you ship it, you can get data out of that data logger that says these are the kind of vibrational inputs that your product experienced. So companies have done that, and they've used that data to create profiles that they put. They make machines like a vibration tester, primarily, that can simulate, say, a truck shipment or an airplane shipment, because it's kind of all about the profile and what they call transit testing. Profiles it's a very common word, and what does that mean? It means you take data raw data that you measure from the field, and you have to turn it into a representative profile, right? Because you can't possibly just take the raw data and expose your package to that. You have to condense it down, basically, into something that is repeatable. So organizations have done that, and people like me can deploy those profiles to with instrumentation, and companies that make the instrumentation, they take that and build it into their software, the profiles, so that you can utilize those profiles.
So that's everything from, the driver picked it up and then he accidentally dropped it, and then it goes back on the truck, and it's the normal road bumps, or maybe uphill, downhill, slamming on the brakes, that type of thing.
It is, and think of it this way: is that so it's what your product sees. So your product may be, it's going like roadway express, a truck transportation company you might see on the highway or freeway. So the product's sitting in the back, not up with the driver, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, they've created profiles that experienced all that, Megan, and through if you've never done this, maybe it's exciting to a packaging engineer, not so exciting to the average person, but if you go into like a UPS hub or a FedEx hub, a sorting hub facility, where they sort, it's like amazing, because boxes are flying through that thing like spaceships, right? It's just moving at lightning speed, getting sorted. Especially around Christmas time, it's probably like mayhem. But and your product gets bumped and banged in that situation too.
Yeah.
So, like ASTM has standards that kind of incorporate that sorting. What happens in a sorting facility. So, believe it or not, as boring as it may seem, people involved in packaging and logistics have spent a lot of time characterizing shipping.
Well, I mean, it's important if you think about that. If you don't design it right, and then it either bursts because of altitude, or if you don't pack it right in the box, and it breaks open, then that's lost revenue. So it really is important, especially if that's going to happen it's not just one, if that's happening to all of your products, then you've got a big problem on your hands.
You're right, Megan. Damage loss through shipping, it can be huge, and companies, it usually doesn't take them too long. Once they start experiencing damage, they're going to try to rectify it quickly, because it's a revenue kill. It's just money out the door. You're burning time fixing it. You may have to stop shipping your product because it's unacceptable level of damage. And so when you look at a medical device or a drug, think about this: is that our job as packaging engineers is to help manufacturers deliver safe and effective drugs, because if you've or medical devices, so if you've compromised the safety and efficacy, those are two buzzwords in our field, you could kill somebody. So the stakes are really high. So that's why packaging engineering is so important, because the very dark side of designing a poor package could be harm to a patient.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's really important, and it hits home. So that's on the. Now let me circle back, because I think that in terms of later on, once you have your product designed, and then you focus on that particular part of the package. But let's move back a step. If you're just designing your product, in terms of packaging engineering, what are some key things that our listeners can take away that they need to start from day one?
Yeah, I'd say maybe I'll outline even like a mini little process, Megan, because that I find that
sure,
if you have a process,
and if you want to, I can. If you want to share this process, I can put it on our show notes page so our listeners can access it.
Okay, good. Yeah, I have a little 2-page document on that, but absolutely. So it's probably best explained in terms of a process. So really, you start out much like you would designing a medical device or a drug, with kind of design requirements. What does this package need to do? And obviously, it needs to protect the product. That's intuitive. But how? What? So you drill down a little bit deeper. So it starts with the design requirements, and that's why there's kind of a big partnership with the product development folks, right? Because they're going to dictate largely what the design requirements are for the package. So you start out with the design requirements, and then things like user needs might be kind of a subset of that. Something that I'm seeing that's kind of part, in my mind, I guess, of design requirements and user needs is, and I'm not an expert in this area, is human factors, where med device companies are spending more time on ensuring that, okay, we designed this particular package, but is it really user-friendly? Are we really designing it for optimum use by the clinician? So human factors gets involved in that. And then you kind of move into a prototyping phase where you probably also want to incorporate, some good clinical. You want to get good clinical feedback, so you can start prototyping your package. So you're making samples. Okay, we think it's going to look like this, and you can, using things like 3D printing, that's kind of helped. In some areas, it's helped packaging develop prototypes and samples, and there are other rapid prototyping tools. I won't get into it too much in detail, but our consulting part of the business does a lot in prototyping, where let's go out and create some packages and see how they interact with the device. And once you start prototyping, kind of an area why I kind of opened this lab or had this idea for this testing laboratory is it's so important to start gathering testing data, performance data. We've got the materials we think identified, the design, how, given all these environmental hazards and other things, how is this package going to work? So you might take some of the prototypes out to the field and get clinician feedback, right? How do they think it works? And then in a testing laboratory, how does this package perform when you put it through some hazards and stresses? Temperature, humidity, vibration, shock, drop. So that's probably the next phase of kind of moving through a package development process. And then, that can be iterative, right? You design it once, it's not quite right, and you kind of keep going back and refining it.
Yeah, and what immediately is coming to my mind, if someone waits till the product is fully designed or almost fully designed and ready for manufacturing, they've already wasted a lot of time, because then they're going to have to hook up with you and go through the iterations, and if they could have started that process earlier, then they save that time to market. Yep. So again, it's just lost revenue.
The one thing that you're right on, Megan. So that's the downside of starting too late, is that you just you can delay all your timelines. Another thing too, that it doesn't happen probably as often as it should, but because some might see it as the tail wagging the dog, but if product development teams partner early on with somebody with some packaging experience, we may actually try to influence the product design. You're thinking, well, why should the package influence the product design? But it can, to the point where it could actually make a better product, and definitely save some money. Because what I've found a lot in my career is we end up band-aiding. The package becomes the band-aid because the product is not very package friendly. So things like, I don't know, even changing the radii on a molded part, the radius on a molded part, so it's not so abrasive on a pouch, say a film, right? Most packaging are thin, right? You're not putting them in titanium cases, because that wouldn't be cost effective. So if we can look at the product and say, if you could modify this design slightly, we could get a less expensive package and not have to spend a lot of time, band-aiding the packaging system to make it work, to have a high-performing package. So that's another area where packaging can add value. We can help actually take cost out of the packaging.
Good. Well, thank you for being on the show today. I think you really brought some value in terms of, and again, I have this up on my website as a tip. You have to start with the end in mind and start things earlier than you think you need to, and that was just proven again here today. So thanks for hitting that home for us.
I agree, Megan. I think you got some great things going on here, and hopefully we brought shed a little bit of light on a field that may not be terribly sexy, but there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of innovation in packaging going on. A lot of packaging folks are pretty passionate about it because we're not usually the stars of the team, but we're key players, and we're all motivated to make the product shine. So that's our goal.
All right. Good.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in today for another episode of InspiredByAMUA.com. And good things happen when we all come together and collaborate, and we bounce ideas off of each other. So if you haven't already, go to Facebook.com. Yes, we're doing business on Facebook. So search Inspired by AMUA on Facebook. There's a Facebook group that we can all be a part of and talk about this, well, off the air, but still online. So I'd love to see you in there. Check it out. And till next time, AMUA!
Mahalo for joining us. If you're new to riding the waves of medical device product development, or if you've been in development for a while already, Inspired by AMUA is here to surf with you. Want to be a master of the waves? Text HANG10, that's HANGTEN, to 44222. We'll send you the most common wipeouts companies make in product development so you can avoid them and reach master wave status. Again, that's HANG10 to 44222. We publish a new episode every Tuesday, so catch us at inspiredbyamua.com. AMUA!